Why don't you take a seat and tell me what appears to be the problem? I am going to do, excuse me, another consult the doctor. It's been a little while for me. Videos don't always get uploaded in the chronological order in which they are shot, so it's been a while that I recorded one and I look forward to doing this. This was a complete waste of time to even tell you this, but I'm going to continue like nothing happened. The first question I received that I thought was very interesting was this. What are your opinions on kit pens? Now that, I think, is a very simple question that requires a very nuanced answer. Kit pens have a bad rep in the pen world, I think. And that is because some people look down on the process of making kit pens, other people look down on the actual kits themselves. And there certainly are kit pens, for example, that have those really long skinny sections that I don't find particularly comfortable to use myself. And so people kind of dislike kit pens. Now, a good kit pen, I have one here. This was made by a Blue Stem pen company. I think a good kit pen, it can be a lot of fun. This is a nice material, it's nicely made. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I also think that we should not look down on kit pens necessarily if they are fairly priced. These ones in my mind certainly are. Some I certainly also think are overpriced. I've seen $250, $300 kit pens. I don't think it's fair to price them that way unless you're using a very exclusive material to make your pens, which often is not the case, and sometimes it is. We shouldn't look down on it, I think, because kit pens, I consider them a gateway into maybe more, or even more, I should say, creative products. Think, for example, that people like Ryan Krusak of Krusak Studios started off building kit pens. And I don't think these days anyone would look at a Krusak pen and would say, wow, that is just disgusting. You know, I don't think anyone would do that. So they can be a gateway into a whole creative process that can lead to great things. Ryan Krusak is a friend of mine, but he's also, in my mind, a great artist. And again, it started with kit pens. It started with kit sections. And now he makes all that himself. So for all you know, someone who starts up with kit pens will develop the skills to then start turning their own sections, doing those kinds of things, creating pens from scratch. So I think we should treat them with some respect. If they are reasonably priced and you find one in a material that you really like, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I own 2 kit pens. This one, another one, which I didn't grab, but it's there. It's in there somewhere. One of them in particular was given to me by my godmother when I defended my PhD, so it has emotional meaning, right? Okay, I hope that answers the question. Next one came to me through email. I broke the fins on my TWSBI 580 feed. Should I now replace it? There are certain brands of fountain pen that have particularly fragile feeds, I have found. TWSBI is one of those brands. Montblanc is another. The fins on a Montblanc feed bend out of shape incredibly easily and can break off incredibly easily. They use a very thin plastic, both of these companies. Now, is that really an issue? Aesthetically, it could be. I have some Pen BBS, that's another good brand, by the way. I have some Pen BBS pens where all the feeds are broken off. Again, same thing, very thin plastic. Now, those were very cheap pens. On a Montblanc, it's a little bit of a different issue. Is it a problem? As I said, aesthetically, yes. Strictly speaking, it can become a problem if you lose all those fins, or some people call them combs. They are there to stop overflow of ink. It's because of the way feeds are built. So they make sure that the ink, like the feed doesn't really flood, and the ink starts to pool out of the pen, or flow out of the pen and pool in the paper, I should say. If you lose 1 or 2 of those fins, it's probably not going to make a big difference. But if you lose all of them, that could become an issue. So should you replace the feed? You don't have to, but be very careful. I think this serves more as a warning. If you're going to disassemble pens of the brands I've just mentioned, be very, very careful with the feeds. And what I like to do is try and grab them from the side. Sorry, I can't see that. So from the side like this, as opposed to top and bottom, because even your thumb can just push those fins out of place and then they'll easily snap off. So I wouldn't expect a massive issue if you've only lost 1 or 2 or maybe 3, but if the whole row of fins is gone, you could get certain issues with a bit more leakage, but that's probably not the case for you, so I'll leave it at that. Okay, the next question is an interesting one. Silver. Should I polish silver or not? Well, here's the thing. This came to me through Facebook Messenger, if I remember correctly. That's a really personal matter. I can tell you what I do. I like to polish my pens, but I also know pens, silver pens. I know not pens, but people are not that out of it yet, although stay tuned for the next question. I know people, friends, who like to get their pens all tarnished. They like it when the silver tarnishes, which is a very nice way. It becomes duller and can become almost black, right? It's a nice way to show that the pen's been used, and wherever you hold it, it will tarnish more. Some people really love that, and I understand that too. So this is one of those things, there is no right or wrong. It's not wrong to polish a pen, it's not wrong to not polish it. You have to do what you think is best, and what you like best. I have a Yardled silver pen. I like it shiny. I just like it better that way, but I certainly also understand the appeal of the antique feeling of a tarnished silver pen. Some people love that. Follow your heart, mate. Okay, final question, and this is a longer one, so I saved some time for this. This is more philosophical, and you may or may not like that, so feel free to tune out. It was a longer email, but it came down to the following. How do you know the difference between an addiction and an obsession? And this was, of course, posed in the context of fountain pens. Let me say first that I am a psychologist, but I'm not a clinical psychologist. I don't deal with patients, I don't give therapy, I'm not actually qualified to give any therapy. So I'm going to try to talk about this in very general terms. And I would like to first turn this duality kind of into a sort of a trifecta of things. I think it's not just addiction and obsession, I think there's also an interest. And the one can turn in the other and then turn into the final step. You probably have an interest in fountain pens if you're watching this video, because this is a channel devoted to fountain pens. So I don't know why you would be watching this if you don't care at all about fountain pens. So let's assume that you have that interest. You may have other interests too. I have other interests. Thank heavens. There's nothing wrong with an interest. You can be interested in fountain pens, stamps, vintage cars, cooking, baking cookies, going on hikes, whatever. It doesn't matter. You can have an interest, and an interest is harmless, right? But now this is where things get interesting. When you look at something like addiction versus obsession, addiction does have to meet certain criteria to be called an addiction. We have that really thick book, the DSM, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the American Psychiatric Association, currently in its 5th edition at the recording of this video, time of recording of this video, which has lists of things. If you meet this and this and this and this and this, and one of these 3, then you have this particular thing, a unipolar depression or a major depressive disorder or a cyclothymic depression or dysthymic. I don't know if they still distinguish that, because again, that's not really my field of psych. In any case, you get the point. You meet this many criteria, then this is the diagnosis that you have. We can have a lengthy discussion about how useful such a system is, because I certainly have opinions there, but that was not the question today. So by following those criteria, you can say, okay, this person has an addiction, substance abuse disorder, whatever you like to call that. Let's try to keep this a little bit focused on fountain pens. You could have an addiction to buying fountain pens. This is real, like shopping addiction is a real thing, right? But how do you know, and how do you distinguish when you've gone from an interest to an obsession to maybe an addiction? Well, I've only ever taken 2 courses in clinical psychology, and they were undergraduate courses, but the one thing that, well, there were a couple of things that stood by me. The one thing that I always found very interesting was what I learned in my first year of studying psychology in psychopathology, the study of clinical psychology. And that was the mnemonic of the 4 Ds. Psychologists, of course, would come up with a mnemonic, something to help you remember something. The 4 Ds: deviance, danger, distress, dysfunction. And I've always found that a very nice sort of rule of thumb or set of guidelines to try and classify behavior. And I've done that in myself too. The more Ds someone displays, the more likely it is that their behavior is pathological, that there's actually a certain level of harmfulness to that behavior. Now let's talk about liking fountain pens. You like fountain pens, right? You purchased maybe 1 pen, maybe a couple of pens, maybe 100 pens, maybe 1,000 pens. Let's go over those Ds. Deviance. Is that behavior deviant? Well, let's be honest, it is a little bit. At the end of the day, you only need 1 pen to write, so if you've bought more than 1 fountain pen, that behavior is a little deviant. That makes me a deviant too. This is not a value judgment, I'm just saying, objectively speaking, it's a little deviant. Most people, I keep calling people pens, hashtag Freud, most people would not spend hundreds or thousands of dollars on pens, but some of us do. So it's a little deviant. Okay, well that's a small red flag, but we're probably okay. But probably I think we're going to be okay. Deviance. The next one is danger. Is it dangerous to have a number of pens, or to spend quite a bit of money on fountain pens? Not necessarily. You could spend your money on certain substances that are a lot more dangerous than fountain pens are. Right? So I think that when it comes to the second D, danger, we're probably fine. We're not really in danger having a number of pens. A little deviant, but it's not really dangerous. Then there is distress. Now this is where things get interesting. Distress. That can be a real thing. I have certainly had a couple of dreams about fountain pens, and you can insert all kinds of Freudian themes in here if you feel the need to do so. But I remember dreaming about fountain pens. In fact, I remember dreaming about large fountain pens, so certainly have your way with Freud here, but that's where things get a little interesting. If you are becoming distressed because you want to purchase a certain pen, you may not be able to do so, maybe financially you're not able to do so, maybe it's the 1 pen you need to finish your collection of Parker 51s or something, and that specific color is what you need, and you get to obsess over that, it starts to be distressing. That's another red flag. Because now behavior that in itself is innocent, liking fountain pens, has taken on a more negative connotation. You're now getting distressed over this, right? Another good example of that, I think, is spending a lot of money. There certainly have been cases in fountain pen history of people who've gone into debt over purchasing pens. That becomes distressful because now you have a debt that you need to pay off because you've purchased so many pens. And that, I think, is a good indicator. If you find those kinds of descriptions apply to you, stressful things, obsessing over things, maybe having spent a bit too much money on pens, especially if that becomes a regular thing, then you are entering a danger zone, because then your behavior is becoming distressful to you, maybe to others. Think of partners, loved ones, family members, friends, whatever. And that can be an issue as well, right? Because this can also be stuff by proxy. Maybe it's not dangerous to you, but it's dangerous to other people. Well, fountain pens, unless you use them in hand-to-hand combat, it's probably not really dangerous to other people, right? So now we have a little bit of deviance, probably no danger, and maybe some distress, maybe not, right? And the final one, I think, is a very interesting and crucial one: dysfunction. At what point does something become dysfunctional? Well, in some ways, as I said, you really only need 1 pen. Let's be totally frank. You only need 1 pen because you need to write down something, and then you need 1 pen for that. You don't need 100, you don't need 1,000, you don't need 5. You just need 1 pen. And I know that for collectors things are a little different. I get that, but I'm on purpose. I'm trying to be a little bit polarizing here, right? That is somewhat dysfunctional behavior. But as long as it's not dangerous, as long as you can still pay the bills at the end of the month, it doesn't have to be very dysfunctional. Once you get to a level where you're spending all your money on pens, you cannot pay your bills, all you can talk about is fountain pens, your friends start to call you Nibby because that's all you talk about, now things have become dysfunctional, not only to you but also to others. And at that point, again, that is a big, I would say, pretty big red flag, right? Red flag that something is a little off and that you may have to reevaluate what you are doing. So what I'm trying to say is those 4 Ds are certainly not hard and fast rules. This is not necessarily something that a therapist would use to diagnose you with something, but they are a nice set of guidelines. Something that's fairly innocuous and that can guide your thinking. I think for most people, they don't meet these Ds when it comes to fountain pen collecting. But I've known people in my time who spend every last penny on fountain pens. If that's their choice, that's fine. If they're happy with it, that's fine. But once you get to a point where you can't pay the bills, where you start to become so obsessed, it's all you can talk about, when you start to dream about pens because you need to have that one pen, then we are in a little bit of trouble. So to close this, hopefully not too boring rant, how do you know the difference between an obsession and an addiction? Well, again, there are actual guidelines for addiction which will tell you what you need to meet. Like if you are starting to lie about pen purchases to loved ones, for example, then that can be a bit of a problem, right? If again, it's all you can talk about. If you buy a pen and you're already thinking about how to purchase your next pen, that sounds a lot like addiction, doesn't it? An obsession, I think, does not have to be negative. You can be really into something without it actually being harmful, but that depends on a specific situation. If things are taking over your life, that's probably a bad thing. If it's a matter of, well, I really like this thing, I like to think about it, read about it, talk about it, but I can also talk about other things, and also read about other things, and also have discussions about other things, and also do other things, and spend my time on other things, it might not be so big a deal. So I would say that's how I would think about it. The more Ds you meet, the more problematic the behavior, the bigger the issue is. And again, that's not an official diagnosis because that's not what we're here for. I'm also not allowed or qualified to do that, but that's what I would say. Think about that issue in those terms. I hope that was an answer to the question. Yeah, I really hope that was an answer to the question. Anyway, let me know what you think. Any other questions you would like to see answered in a future Consult the Doctor, leave them below. It may be a little while before I get to them, but I do try to get to all of them. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think of the 4 Ds: obsession, addiction, and interest in things. And that's all there's to it. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I'll see you next time. Bye!